Hey YouTube, Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you, and today I have the Benchmade Griptilian, although this is not quite your normal Griptilian. Now the original Griptilian is a Mel Purdue design, and it's a great knife. In fact, if you watch the late Boy Scouts video where he does a shop tour of Benchmade, the marketing guy there, or the public relations guy, pretty well says this is their best-selling folding knife. Now, that means it's a popular knife already. How do you make a knife that popular even better? Well, in my opinion, you get Doug Ritter to redesign the blade. And I'll just be honest with you, as I've looked at Griptilians, I've looked at lots of them, I've watched reviews, I've looked in catalogs, I just can't get into it. And primarily it's because of the blade. I don't know what it is, can't tell you exactly why, I'm just not a fan of the blade shape on the normal Griptilian. However, I'm a huge fan of this blade shape found on the Ritter Griptilian, or the Griptilian RSK, and RSK just stands for Ritter Survival Knife. Okay, great modification to this knife. And now, with this particular blade shape, I'm a huge fan. Not only is the blade shape different, but the blade steel is different as well. And from, at this point, if you go to buy this knife brand new, the blade steel is different again. I think now you're buying it in M390, and actually the regular Griptilian has a few different blade steel variations available right now. So if the 154 CM was holding you back, there's a bunch of Griptilians out there now. I saw one recently in N690, I think on BladeHQ.com, M390 at KnifeWorks.com. And so just kind of look around, and I think you'll find the particular blade steel that maybe you're interested in, or that makes that knife a little bit special for you, okay? For me, I thought this was a great option. This was from the secondary market, it's S30V, and so I'll make some comments more about that when we get to blade steel. All right, so the one last thing that I want to say about it by way of introduction is, now that you know it's the redesigned blade that I really like, that kind of finally sold me on this. The other thing is, I got this off the secondary market, and when it came to me, it was pretty rough. And you already know that if you've seen my TLC for your EDC video. But I took this apart, cleaned it up, and have put it back together, and now it functions just great, just the way I want it to. So the other thing I should comment on is that as I do this review, I'm doing it from the perspective of having torn this knife down into every little piece, cleaned everything, even buffed the washers and sort of pivot area on the blade, and put it all back together, okay? So I have a pretty intimate level of knowledge about this knife, more so than some of the others that I've looked at, okay? Now, let's get into the size and weight, because that's one of the reasons I think this knife is so popular. I'm going to come in just a little bit, maybe not quite that much. There we go, give you a better look at the blade. So this knife is 3 3/8 inch blade, 4 5/8 inch handle. I wanted to say 5/8 first, which wouldn't make sense, but yeah, 4 5/8 inches here, 3 3/8 inches here, and if you can do simple math, you know that adds up to 8 inches overall. So 8 inches is a good size for a folding knife. For me, that is sort of the smaller end of a full-size EDC knife. As you know, I sometimes go up to 8 or even 10 inches with like the Zabo and stuff. So it's a good size knife for me, very lightweight at only 3.8 ounces. So this is sort of smaller in all the ways that you want a knife to be smaller, large enough blade to be capable, large enough handle to be comfortable, but very lightweight, so it's not very, so it's easy to carry, okay? Now this dimension is a little bigger. That does make it more noticeable in pocket, however, it also makes it more comfortable in hand. Okay. By the way, the mini Griptilian would not be a knife that I would at all be interested in, because notice that even in this handle, my hand basically covers up the whole thing. So if you were to make this handle even smaller yet, for me, it would not be comfortable to use. And so I definitely would not, for my purposes, recommend the mini Griptilian. If you have and like some of those 3-finger knives, then maybe that one's more appropriate or more appealing to you. Grab a couple of comparisons here that I think make sense. Here's the Spyderco Tenacious, very common, and so you can see the Griptilian is just a little bit bigger than the Tenacious. I've got one other knife here that's also a really common EDC, and I would say pretty good competition for the Griptilian. Here's the Kershaw Blur. This is the Blackwash in 14C28N. Love this knife, by the way. And I think we'll do a comparison video between these two at some point in time. Now, because I think, by the way, that 14C28N compares well to 154CM. Anyway, getting back to the main subject here, let's carry on and get into the blade detail. The blade is one of the places where Doug Ritter made some changes. And this blade shape, I'm going to move off and come in just a little bit closer. There you go. This blade shape is one that he seems to prefer. If you go on his website, you'll see that he has a fixed blade and this one and then the mini. They're all the same blade shape. He seems to think this is a good blade shape for outdoor wilderness type of tasks, and I would be inclined to agree. It is a flat ground blade, fairly high flat grind. It's not thick stock already, so that means you get a very thin slicing edge here. It is a drop point, means the point there is fairly pointy, but not overly so. Nice belly here for a lot of EDC tasks, or even some small skinning tasks. Now, you know, if you've got to skin out a deer or something, probably this is not the knife for the job. But for smaller things, you could probably deal with that, you know, in some kind of a survival situation. Since this is designed for survival, I'm going to say it is a folding knife. All the same rules apply as any other folding knife. Don't go batoning with it. Don't go, you know, chopping stuff with it. It's not going to put up with that kind of use for any prolonged period of time, okay? It's just not. You know, folding knives are not meant for that. And if that's the situation you're in, you're probably better off with a fixed blade, like we've said lots of other times. Okay, however, for virtually everything else, and I have done a lot of stuff. I've cut everything from tomatoes to wood to cardboard to, you know, everything in between. This knife has performed really well. It's a great slicer because of that high flat grind. Rust resistance is going to be excellent because both of the S30V blade steel, which already has great rust resistance, but a stonewash finish is also known to increase that as well. So you're going to have a great blade here. You know, if you're in an outdoor situation, you're not going to have to worry about any kind of corrosion on that. Now, one thing you may struggle with is sharpening. Of course, S30V takes a very sharp edge and takes one moderately easily. You know, if you compare this to, say, an AUS 8 or 13C28N, you're going to have a little harder time sharpening this, or even 14C28N if you've got a Kershaw that you're used to sharpening. It's going to be a little tougher to sharpen, but it's going to hold that edge very well. And like I say with all my knives, if you strop it regularly, what I pretty much do is if I've used a knife that day, I'll strop it. If I've heavily used it, I may hone it and strop it. And then every, you know, little while, I'll have to actually sharpen it, put a whole new edge on. So very good edge holding capability on S30V blade steel, and this is no exception. Especially good because of that very thin edge geometry. Okay, now moving on from the blade to deployment. Guess what? It's an axis lock. It is amazing in terms of deployment. They always are. I don't have any axis locks that don't make you want to sit there all day and flip your knife a million times. They just are very good on deployment. So let me just demonstrate for you. Very good, very fast. And of course, the cool thing about the axis lock is you're getting a lot of speed and not having to sacrifice on strength. Is it as strong as a cold steel triad lock? No. Is it one of the stronger knife locks out there? Absolutely. Would it be superior to, say, a liner lock or even a frame lock? I would be inclined to say yes, it would. Now, you know, again, it's a folding knife, so you're not going to pretend like it's a fixed blade. It's not going to be as strong. There's always going to be a weak point. And so you got to keep that in mind. You know, really, I don't show preference to any particular lock, although I will say that my two favorite locks to play with in terms of, you know, opening and closing are definitely the compression lock from the PM2 and the axis lock on any Benchmade. Okay, so very good lock, very strong and very fast, and of course lots of fun to sit and play with while you're reading a book or watching a YouTube video or, you know, sitting at the office working. tons of fun to flip as you're doing all that stuff. All right, handle. This is one of the areas that the Griptilian gets some flack over because this handle feels kind of hollow. And the reason it feels hollow is because it's hollow. So if you kind of do this type of thing, you can hear that it is not solid steel. Although having said that, if I squeeze it a little bit, you might be able to see a little flex. Let me look at it from my side. Yeah, it might be flexing a teeny bit, but it is a very, very strong knife. And there are a few destruction tests where this lock is put to the test and does very well, even in this handle. Now the handle is, I don't know, I wrote down the name of it, give me a second. Neural GTX. Neural GTX. Essentially, it's another brand of fiber reinforced plastic, okay? So the way that works is just like concrete with rebar in it, you take plastic, you add fibrous material, usually glass fibers, and they add strength to the plastic. These materials are very, very strong. And I know that G10 is sort of the darling child of the knife world. Everybody wants every knife to be G10 handle scales. And G10 is great. I have a lot of G10, I like G10, but I really don't think you're losing a whole lot. I have a number of blades that have some form of reinforced plastic, and I'm just gonna, I know I'm oversimplifying, but whether it be Zytel or Neural GTX or Grivery or whatever, they're very capable, okay? And I don't think that should put you off from buying a knife. Now, if you say, hey, it feels kind of light and maybe feels almost a little bit cheap, okay, that's subjective. I think anything that feels light is going to feel a little bit cheaper. This does feel light, but it's very strong. It's been shown to be very strong repeatedly. And it's very comfortable and very grippy. So you're getting a lot of good out of all this. By the way, there is a good thumb ramp here, and the jimping is done in such a way that it actually does grip your hand quite well. All right, so you got very good retention on this. However, this is one of those things that I complain about all the time. The retention on this knife is primarily achieved through texturing. Okay, notice there's no deep choils, there's no cutouts of any kind. So the way you keep this knife in your hand is by holding on tight and depending on the texturing to give you enough grip, okay? And I'm always a little hesitant. I prefer to see grip attained through the shape of the handle rather than through texturing, because I feel like things can overcome texturing. What if there's mud? What if there's blood? What if, who knows what if? When a knife is shaped to grab your hand and lock it in, it doesn't matter what you do. You could be swimming and just hold on the knife still. So that is maybe one detraction, although having said that, the knife is very, very comfortable in hand, even for very hard use tasks where you're really bearing down. Okay, I want to make one comment. By the way, the pocket clip is just perfect. It is 2-position and that's it. But those 2 positions are great. The lanyard hole is probably too small, and I don't always comment on lanyard holes. I don't use lanyards, so it's not at the top of my list of things to care about, okay? Pocket clip, though, is perfect. One thing I do want to say is this knife did display a little bit, and every axis lock knife that I have does this. It will develop a little bit of blade play because of the fact that when you have it in your pocket, lint kind of builds up and sticks in here, and then when you open it, a little piece of that lint can sometimes get between the lock bar and the blade tang and interfere. So instead of having metal on metal, you've got metal, a piece of dust or grit or whatever, and then metal, and that allows just a little bit of movement. Now usually do this and the blade play is gone. Now this one tends to perform a little better than some of the other Benchmades I have. It is solid as a rock right now. Some of the others, for example, my Contigo, will more consistently develop that problem, and I think it's because if you look here, the blade tang is, an 1/8 of an inch or so inside the handle. On the Contigo, the blade tang is almost flush out here, so that means it's always rubbing in the bottom of your pocket, has lots of chance to collect dirt and lint and all that, where this one doesn't touch the bottom of your pocket when you're carrying it, okay? So that's the handle. We've talked about lockup, we've talked about blade. overall, I can totally understand why this knife is so popular. I really can. It's very lightweight, it's very usable, high-end materials, access lock. There's just not too many things that this knife gets wrong. And so overall, I've got to say, highly recommended blade. I really like it, and I carry it a lot. This is a knife, you know, sometimes at night, let's say if I change into lighter pants, track pants, in the summer if you're wearing shorts, wearing dress pants to church, let's say, this is a knife you can still carry. It's very, very lightweight. It's not going to add anything at all. It's also a knife that you could even carry, even though it's a full-size knife, it is light enough that, let's say on a particular day you're carrying, I don't know, a large Espada or my Spyderco Zabo or an XL Voyager, or, you know, any one of those larger blades. You can easily put this in your offside pocket or even in the same pocket, and you're not really going to notice it at 3.8 ounces. But you can use it. I don't find this wouldn't be very intimidating, I don't think. Maybe my perspective is not perfect on that. Maybe some people would find this troubling, but I think most people are going to see a knife like this, especially with the orange handle, and be like, yeah, it's just a pocket knife, right? So when you're carrying something else like that, I think this is a knife you could carry as, you know, your sort of EDC knife, and then only pull the bigger knife out when you need it. I would add that this would also function very well. I mean, perfectly well as an everyday carry. I know it's called the Ritter survival knife. I don't really see this as a survival knife. If I'm going into the woods, frankly, I'm bringing a hatchet and I'm bringing a fixed blade. Sure, I'll have a folding knife with me because I always do, but I'm not going to be depending on it as my go-to blade for bushcraft tasks. Not that this one wouldn't do a whole lot and that I haven't had it, you know, it's performed really well. And I purposely tried to, you know, can I start a fire? Can I do those kinds of things with it? And sure, you can, definitely. Do I want to? Do I want to have to depend on this in the forest? No, I want a hatchet, right? I want a fixed blade, and really you probably want a gun as well if I'm really stuck out in the woods. But whatever you've got, you've got. And so yeah, I'd rather have this than nothing. Overall, great blade. I don't think you'll be disappointed if you pick one of these up. Highly, highly recommend it. Now I will say, not all of, you know, I'm recommending this knife. I can't speak to every other Griptilian. I have heard some rumors, if you're still watching, that the tolerances on this model are slightly better. True or not, I can't really say, but this knife is great and I highly recommend it. We'll talk to you later.